probably about half a mile to a mile from the parking area. And at the first beach you come to is very, very stony. And then you can walk across when the tide's lower. And there's a big beach moving back up north that is very, very sandy. It was great. There's a load of rocks on the far side, so I wandered up there, sat down, I got my camera bag with me, taking photos, and was really just waiting for the sort of sundown. So just about to go back, very happy with what I'd taken. And we have an expression, someone's walked over your grave. You really feel quite, your hair stands on end, you feel cold. And I looked over to the way I would need to go back, and there were, I thought first of all it was a huge cat, but it was much more big and bulky than a cat. And then there was more than one of them as they came round the promontory where you've got the cove shape. And I have never seen anything like it in my life. Very, very large, very hairy, moving on all fours, and there were several of these creatures, one behind the other. It obviously wasn't a cat because it was moving in a very strange manner, and the head kept popping up as if it was sniffing, and then it popped up. It stood up on 2 feet. There was no other way to describe it, and it was bipedal. Must have been 7 to 8 foot tall. It was followed in onto this cove by 2 other 5 to 6 foot, maybe just over 6.5 foot, and 3 much smaller ones. The larger one, which was definitely male, waded into the ocean. The 2 others, the 2 larger ones, which were, I would have said, females, sat down on the sand with the smaller ones. The smaller ones were digging in the sand. The large creature, the really large one, was ripping out seaweed and throwing it back towards the females, and they were chewing the roots where it had been pulled out of the water and rubbing it onto their chests and around their necks, and then draping it around over their shoulders. So I'm just sat there, I'm just watching this. I can't say I was actually thinking anything more than stunned. And probably like the idiot I am, I just thought, well, no one's going to believe this, I'll take some photographs of it. So lifted the camera up to take photographs. But part of the lens kit dropped off, hit the rocks, went bouncing down where I was sat, and the large creature turned round. Every one of them snapped round and was staring toward me, at which point the male that was in the water basically was up to its I'd say mid-chest in the water, came striding out of the water. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. And basically it looked, the way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. One of the females, the larger one of the 2 females, came after it, and probably about 30 yards or so away from me, they had an argument, for want of a better word. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. The male that was in front it didn't take its eyes off me, but it sort of rotated from the waist. The head didn't really turn, it rotated from the waist. And it was like if you see a couple in a shop, it was verbalizing with her. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. And it was like a couple having a domestic dispute. Then the body turned right back at me, and it just breathed. It was like no other sound I've ever heard. It was bellowing at me, and effectively it just threw down and slammed its fists into the sand, and then stood up. It basically, the last thing I remember, because I passed out, I'm presuming I passed out, I was feeling incredibly sick, was this thing, mouth wide open, big pink mouth, and it was obviously male. It had an erection and it was urinating, and that is all I remember.
Well, what happened next?
Well, what happened next is I came to. This was just coming probably sunset by now. It was 5:30, 6 o'clock when this happened. So there was still very good light. The next thing that happens is I come to about 20, 30 yards back from where my car is parked. I was dressed in hiking boots, jeans. I had a shirt on underneath, and I had a wax cotton jacket. They're fairly common in the UK, called barbers, and this one was a gamekeeper's jacket, so it zips both ways, so you can zip down from the top and you can zip up from the bottom. And this was actually almost pulled over my head. You see, I can't understand how I got there. I was black and blue up my left-hand side, and my face was very badly scratched and bruised. I could have got there. I just don't understand how I got there, because I can't remember getting there. I hadn't got my camera, I hadn't got my camera bag. I just don't know. Got to my car, I got the keys that were in my zipper pocket, in my breast zipper pocket, got back into the car, drove to the hotel. Now, the hotel where you pull into it's right off Highway 1, just before you come into Carmel. And you don't have hotel rooms, they're little cabins built into the side of the valley as it's going up, facing the ocean. And they do valet parking, so you have to walk through the main reception area of the hotel to get to the car. Obviously, I was in one hell of a state. And the young man that was doing the valet parking went and got someone. They obviously thought I'd been assaulted. I wasn't making any much sense. So they put me in a side room and called the police. And the police duly came, took my details. But first of all, there was one guy who just wanted me to run through everything that had happened. And I did. And he sat there and looked at me. The first thing was, he was saying, have I been drinking? Was I on drugs? Obviously, I was very young to hold the business position I did. He was quite incredulous until I got the business cards out. Then again, he was, what was I doing down there by myself? Found it quite strange. And he was just being, to my mind, incredibly rude and obnoxious by this point. So then he asked me to go through everything again. And by this time, another chap joined him. Now, the first man was in uniform. The second man wasn't. And if he was a police officer, well, I've never seen a police officer like him. He had jeans on, what we'd referred to a lumberjack shirt, so it was plaid, white t-shirt underneath that. He was in his 40s, early mid 40s, very, very wiry, pepper hair, big beard. Didn't say anything, just stood at the back of the room and listened to what I had to say. Went through the whole thing again, and the man said, well, what you obviously saw was bears. You'll be very, very lucky. You know, you're lucky to be alive. Obviously, you know, you just concussion and you've staggered back up to the car. And, you know, I think I said in my email to you, the largest animal we have in the UK, natural animal, is a red deer. But I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears. And I was quite adamant about that fact with him. And he read me the riot act, and what I saw had been bears, and I wasn't to say anything to anyone else about bears, other than it was bears. And I again turned around and said, absolutely not. And he said, do you not have police in your country? And it was, well, yes, we do. I said, but they don't tell you what to write in statements. And he just looked at me and said, do you understand English? I said, well, I am English, actually. I understand it very, very well. Thank you. And he said, you're not to discuss this with anyone. We've taken your report, and you're not to get back there. And that was that. And that pretty much, that was the end of it, Wes. I stayed in the hotel over Sunday. I still felt incredibly sick. I cancelled my visit to Madison. I was to fly up there on the Monday, and I flew home instead on the Tuesday.
Wow, what an account, Claire. What an account. I guess welcome to America. I mean, I think you were talking to a police officer, and the other guy was probably a government contractor. I want to come back to that, though, in a minute. When you, during the encounter, do you think you were dragged back to your car?
If I had, the truthful answer is I don't know. Do I think I was? I think I was dumped there, because if I had walked and stumbled, I would have had marks on both knees, my hands. My hands were pretty much not damaged. It was the back of my hands that was scratched, and it was the side of my face. And I do think, I think I was dragged there. I think I was dragged there and dumped.
Yeah, I think that you were too. Your injuries are consistent with being dragged, and especially with your coat being pulled up, you're probably dragged by your coat and dumped there. And I think you're right. I think you would have had, you know, if you had have stumbled back to your car, your knees would have been all scratched up. And so I tend to agree with you. I want to ask you, can you describe the creatures that you saw?
As I said, the one was definitely male. They were mammals. They moved from... The younger ones tended to move on all fours. And it's the strangest thing that, as I said, I've ever seen. They got a movement that, if you've ever seen lizards move, where they put their sort of forearms through, and it almost looks like a swimming motion. And then there's no distinct neck. So when the heads came up, it looked really quite bizarre. Black hair. The females had shorter hair than the male, and the males had round its face, the hair was longer. It was, I'm not saying like a lion's ruff, but you know, like a lion has longer hair around its face. It had longer hair and sort of a ruff around its neck. The chest was not as hairy, but it was like a very, very large, very fit bodybuilder, massive muscles on either side of its head. The arms were slightly longer and very, very long fingered. It looked apish, thin lips. It had flat teeth like us, but very large canines, black eyes. The eyes must have been I was slightly above it on the rocks when I lost consciousness. And the eyes must have been about 4 or 5 inches apart. The actual facial area was hairless, the chest hairless, the forearms were somewhat shaggy, but that was it. As I said, the females didn't have the same muscle structure. If anything, they seemed chubby, and they had shorter hair than the male, but other than that, the appearance was similar. It seemed more ape-like than human. That's pretty much it, really. The mouth was incredibly pink, but I presume that was because it was angry. And it was angry. That's all I can say. The other thing that in hindsight, it's fascinating. They were definitely verbal. They were communicating with each other. They were in conversation with each other, a very angry conversation with each other, but that's all it was. It sounded like a language that you could almost understand, but you couldn't. I think in the email I called it gibberish, and it would... and when one would finish speaking to the other, it would go... and the other one, they were just back and forward, back and forward, back and forward. And that was pretty much that. Like I said, after they finished having their domestic, the male turned around as he was at full height, screamed, and just smashed his fist into the ground, and that and the scream, and I was very much